latest on the battle to stop migrants being housed on the former RAF base in Essex. RAF Wethersfield, of course, could house as many as 1,700 male asylum seekers. But the charity Care for Calais is taking legal action against the government. It says its efforts are a bid to literally safeguard people's lives. Well, I'm joined now by Alan Mackenzie, who is the chair of the Fields Association. Thanks for joining us on the show, Alan. Alan, I think a lot of people will be quite confused here because people that live around the RAF bases, both at Scampton and Wethersfield, don't want military-aged men in their thousands to go to them, and neither do the so-called friends of the asylum seekers, Care for Calais. What would be the reasoning of Care for Calais being against this? We just lost him. The point I want to make, if Alan, we could get him back, is that Care for Calais basically agree with the people who live near bases. Chris, let's talk about this in the studio. I find it astonishing that they want the same thing, but for very, very different reasons. Now, Care for Calais will maintain, I've read their press release, that it's inhumane, it's not safe, it's unfair. But they actually want the same thing as people who want to stop the boat.
Well, that's right. Care for Calais are concerned about how they're treated, but of course this is the UK. I mean, I think they've got to be housed somewhere. This seems like an appropriate solution to put them in hotels. That's also offends communities, and it's difficult to understand for many people who wonder why they can't get into a local hotel this Christmas because it's got migrants staying in them. So I think often these campaign groups risk losing public support. They come from the right place. They're trying to deal with the situation. Care for Calais is trying to improve lives for people in Calais in the camps as they wait to cross over. But to what extent are you damaging actually your case by taking these legal challenges?
Well, I've been a cynic about Rishi Sunak with Elon Musk, and I'm going to be a cynic about this too. I don't think that Care for Calais want to stop them going into RAF bases. I think they want to continue their business model of welcoming asylum seekers to the UK and dotting them around the UK in communities that won't affect where they live. I think the bleeding hearts aren't necessarily always, their first eye isn't on the welfare of people who, after all, are staying in barracks that have been perfectly hospitable for RAF crews for many, many decades.
It comes from the right place. I mean, Care for Calais is trying to look after people who are living homeless, really, before they're waiting to come across the UK. But at what point do the charities start to almost reinforce the behaviours they're trying to help, so that it becomes a kind of support service? I know that Lee Anderson on the Home Affairs Committee, when he was on that, went out there, and he was concerned, not necessarily about Care for Calais, but generally what he saw, he was concerned about to what extent are groups helping migrants to come across when in fact they should be trying to dissuade them from coming in the first place.
It's been interesting politically because there has been huge resistance from locals wherever these places are put, either at Scampton, of course, that's the famous site of the Dam Busters, huge historical significance and cultural significance in Wethersfield, in Essex, also at Linton on Ouse. People don't want these in their backyard, and yet the courts find in favour of this, and the government seems to be pressing ahead with this despite the public resistance. Is this another example, Chris, you think, of the government being completely tin-eared to the needs of locals?
They've got to go somewhere. I mean, 1,700 adult males is probably alarming for people living nearby. They don't know who they are, and are they able to free to associate with the community, walk around? That, I mean, then it's the idea of being imposed on. But what are the alternatives? You can't. It's cold. You can't do camps. You can't do marquees. I mean, this is the best the government can do, I think, to where they go. I think hotels are much more controversial because that can be really disturbing for many different communities.
But in Calais, they Care for Calais, they're under tarpaulins, they're in tents, they're on beaches, and you may not think that's good, but that's the situation. Maybe that's why they're so keen to come to Britain.
Yes, I think certainly the hotels are a draw. I think having more Spartan accommodation, I mean, they were looking, weren't it, at student accommodation, I think, during the holiday season in the summer. But I think this is the best. I think we're going to see a lot more of these camps being used for housing migrants. I think this is the way it's going to go until they can deal with the backlog and get Rwanda working. It's going to have to happen.
But then there's still a sticking point of the notion they won't actually be contained, as it were, to the premises. Like in Linton and Ouse, I went to Linton and Ouse and I spoke to many, many families there. and it was about 150 people lived in this village, and they were going to dump 600 or 700 military-aged men on a village with one fish and chip shop, didn't even have a pub, and they were going to be free just to wander around. In fact, they were getting a free bus pass into town. So the idea that they're imprisoned in an inhumane manner isn't reality. In actual fact, they'll be free to roam around. To do what?
Nothing wrong with that, because they're not criminals, are they? They're just people walking around. But I guess might feel a bit imposing to have a large number of people suddenly walking around, and there's a lack of understanding of why they're there. So it's probably down to community leaders there to facilitate meetings with them, probably, and ensure that everyone feels relaxed about a difficult national situation. But it goes back to the beginning. The heart of all this is, why can't this government control borders? Many voted to leave the European Union to control borders and laws. It's not happening, and it's a failure on this government's part, and they will be punished at the election. I think next year's election, immigration will be a huge issue in it, and here's a case in point.
Yeah, and if they stop the boats, and they wouldn't need to put them on RAF bases, they wouldn't need to put them in £8 million a day hotels, but they're measurably not achieving that. OK, thanks, Chris.